Hello and welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by my co-host, Jace. Jace, how was your game week 33?
Sucked.
Oh, no.
No, well, it wasn't horrible, right? Thank God for Cole Palmer and Captain Holland. Otherwise, I'd be in a pretty sticky spot. Small red arrow, right? Nothing crazy, but not a green arrow, which is what we're aiming for, but still only 6 points short of my 69-point goal. So not too bad. I did leave 16 points on the bench, which really sucked because it's even worse that I had the ability to kind of crush it, right? Yeah. Claw back some rank. But because of some late/early morning decisions I made, this is where I'm at. So I don't know about you, but I woke up at like 4:30 or 5:30 because I couldn't sleep because I was toiling over these decisions, and I was just refreshing the Twitter page looking for a leak. Saw the leak that Holland was starting, and with the news of the Luton Town center backs, I was like, oh yeah, like you have to captain Holland. But for some stupid reason, I was like, okay, well, yeah, if I'm going to captain Holland, I'll start Muniz and put Garnacho on my bench. 4 points there. Didn't get. And then I was like, oh yeah, if I'm going to start Holland, then hopefully, I'm doing this thing where I'm like, Sonny's going to go off still. So I put Onana in goal instead of Dubravka, who had 6 points. Same with Robinson. I just made all these horrible changes beyond captaining Holland that I shouldn't have made. I should have left my team alone before that. So yeah, I'm frustrated. I don't know what else to say. How about you, Chris?
Palmer is weird. We'll start there. As a Chelsea supporter, I mean, the guy's a maniac, right? Single-handedly making the team watchable this year. From a fantasy standpoint, he's really tricky because we're sort of at this point where he's over 100% owned. So from a fantasy standpoint, the average score across the platform looks better, but he's not necessarily doing us any favors this week, just kind of having him as a single game week asset. So you mentioned like Palmer saving your game week. I feel like it's really the Holland captaincy thing that worked out for both of us. I did not wake up for the leaks. I saw the news about the Luton Town center backs on Friday. I sort of made the risk reward calculation of, okay, now given this additional circumstance or scenario, I'm willing to risk Holland captain with the understanding that he was, 60, 70% to start. And I think throughout the week too, I mean, we were pretty critical of his chances of starting when we talked last week. And I think the more I sat with that information, the more I kind of went more towards like, okay, 70-30, I think he's starting. I don't know about you, or if you were like firm Salah until you saw a leak. No, you weren't.
I was Sonny.
Firm Sonny until you saw the leak. Well, I mean, that's a dodge bullet.
That's a dodge cannonball at that point.
That's a good point. Speaking of Holland, kind of in the Premier League generally, I think we should talk about the title race because there are FPL implications to that, particularly when we look at game week 37 and game week 38. City win this weekend. Both Arsenal and Liverpool lose unexpectedly at home. With shame. That, yes, it is a bummer. As a fan, you want the title race. Is that sarcasm about
that was
Arsenal?
Sarcasm? Sure. Of course, okay. It was sarcasm. I don't want fucking Arsenal to win the title. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's fair, man. As a neutral, I think I would prefer it to be close. With
sure. Listen, I'm with you. I don't want to see City win another title. I'd much rather Liverpool win it, with it being Klopp's last year, right? I still think I would take City over Arsenal winning a title any day of the week. I'd take Tottenham not making Champions League for Arsenal to get kicked out of the Champions League this season. You're not going to change my mind there. But I would love to see someone else other than City and Arsenal win the title. I agree.
Yeah. With that, Man City's chances, it looks like they were minus 250 as of this morning in American odds, which is like around a 70+% chance to win the title. Are you thinking about the end of the season, transfer plans, et cetera, differently after this weekend's results, or are you kind of sticking to your guns?
I think a lot of it depends on what happens tomorrow, right? And then consequently what happens in the next round of the Champions League will more dictate my plans than I guess the title race, right? Because Liverpool probably aren't going to rotate players at this point. They're going to start their best 11 because I mean they got smacked by Atalanta, right? And that's a pretty big hole to dig out of. So I'm assuming they're going to be out of the next round. So they'll focus purely.
When you say start their best 11, are you referring to start their best 11 in the Premier League or in the Europa League this week?
Yes, in the Premier League. In the Premier League, okay. Yeah. No rotation risk for FPL and Liverpool in my head. The only risk there is who's healthy and who's not, right? I do think that certain clubs are going to start prioritizing certain competitions, right? I feel like Arsenal might prioritize the UCL over the Premier League at this point, given what happened at the weekend. I know City are vulnerable sometimes, but they've got a pretty good run in, right? I feel like they have the easiest schedule of the three. That's pretty common knowledge. So I don't think they're going to really risk that. I think they're going to put all their effort towards the Champions League. So if they make it to the next round, I'd probably steer away from the Arsenal assets a little more. But beyond that, not really. The run in itself, the title race isn't changing my plans, so to say. It's more the European competitions. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, after it might have just been kind of a moment to moment reaction, but after this week, I actually considered a couple drafts not free hitting this week.
Really?
Yeah, which is a pretty big departure from the plan. When I look at my team, I have 11 players that I can field this week. I have Palmer and Petrovic from Chelsea that are at Arsenal. That's a bad fixture, but we've talked about, or will talk about again, Arsenal's fixture congestion. So, yeah. And especially Palmer is fixture proof. Petrovic is that's probably a 1 or 2 pointer. That's fine, for a week. The area where I got concerned, I have to bench 2 Spurs guys who blank, and then my other bench player is still Amari Bell from Luton, who doesn't play. So if Tony is benched again and doesn't play, or Garnacho, who was brought off at halftime this week that we'll talk about, if he doesn't start, very quickly I'm playing with 9, and the free hit is a worthwhile chip to use at this point.
Yeah,
it's just it's a big pivot to based off of a 70% title chance. If Man City were running away with it, I think I'd be more inclined to try that. But it was at least interesting, I think, to think about.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, I still think you've got to figure out what of those assets for that next double game week are. And we still have a couple of weeks to figure that piece out, right? What Newcastle assets, Spurs assets, City assets, because I think they're going to change based on what we thought they might have been a week ago to what they're going to be in 2 weeks' time, just based on, like you said, the title race and some other circumstances surrounding the players and who's available and all that. So I still plan on free hitting. I feel like I set my plan up all those weeks ago, right, to free hit this week. And I feel like if I don't, I kind of sacrifice points in the last couple of weeks that I didn't need to. So I kind of want to stick with the plan, because even though I, like I said, didn't hit the point goal that I wanted to this week, I still had the potential to. So I still feel like the process that we talk about is still working. So want to lean in there and stick to that. So
the team I worry about is City because of the double game week. So if you're Haaland, Foden, KDB, Haaland, Foden, defender, we've talked about Rodri, etc. Like you could be triple City or double City in 37, and they could rest everybody in 38. And that's at least 2 transfers. And you're probably going to want to use at least 1 transfer going into the bench boost week to like kind of round out your player. So that's at least a -4 in the final game week, depending on what your bench situation is. And if Salah doesn't play, if Saka doesn't play, very quickly we could be down to 7-8 players. Now, I know Salah tends to play in these fixtures, and I think Saka did at the end of last season as well. But if Arsenal are still in contention for Europe, potentially that's a little bit different. Or if Liverpool turn it around in the Europa League, I could see these players being rested. But it's a lot of ifs. I think that's the problem, is if I knew this for sure, I could really entertain free hit 38, because these are sort of, hypotheses that are 5-6 weeks away. I think it's tougher to rip up the plan and bet on Ivan Toney and Garnacho this week.
Yeah, I think there are a lot more implications to consider too, because there's some relegation battles there as well that will be dictated based on if people are resting players or not. And I know the Premier League, the clubs can get fined in a lot of hot water if they don't send their best 11 out, or at least a passable best 11. I know there's been litigation in the past. So you talk about Arsenal playing Everton, who could still definitely get relegated, right? And they're pretty much the only one, because Wolves are safe, West Ham's safe, right? But still some European slots there at play. So I still feel like they'll probably put most of their players out. I don't know that we have to worry about being without 6 players, but definitely probably without 1 or 2. But I feel like Haaland still plays in a lot of these games, and if he's still close to the Golden Boot, he's going to want to give it a go. You know,
Yeah,
I think
Holland
there's
did
still those
not.
things around.
He did not play last year after City had clinched, but they were still alive in the Champions League.
Champions League,
So that,
right.
and the other thing, if it's Holland is out, you do have more budget, so you might be taking more hits, but your like overall team strength is probably better because you don't have to worry about fitting in a 14 million striker
And
too.
listen, they're only up 2 points right now, so they still have to win that last game, or at least draw it to maintain where they're at. So as it stands right now, I'm not super worried about that. But in 2 weeks' time, if City have run away with it and Arsenal and Liverpool both shit the bed again, then yeah, that's a conversation we'll have to sort out, right, and figure out what hits were taken and all that fun stuff. But it'll make for an exciting episode.
Yeah, that's true. There will be a lot to talk about potentially before game week 38. Either way, speaking of Garnacho, I wanted to revisit one of our bigger decisions from last week. We talked quite a bit about whether we should go Garnacho or Gordon this week in terms of transfers to set up for bench boost in game week 37. We, I think, both ultimately opted for Garnacho. Obviously, Gordon came off with a 17-pointer. In hindsight, looking back, anything about that decision or kind of what went into our process that you think we could have done differently?
I feel like we still kind of talked through the right things for the process. I think I probably would make the decision again, because the circumstances around it didn't change. We just know the outcome at this point, which is the difference, right? It sucks because I was heavy on Gordon, but you talk about budget, right? And the game's coming up. I knew I was going to probably bring Gordon in at some point in the next 3 weeks. It was just a matter of when. I still think my next transfer is Nunez to Isak. I don't know that I'm going to send like Saka for Gordon yet, right? So it sucks being without him, right? Especially being so close to bringing him in for the plan. But that's just how it goes. I still think, Garnacho returns still, right? Not to the extent that Gordon did, but he's not going to get a double-digit haul every week, right? The bill's going to come due there.
Yeah, I went through and just tried to write down, like, here's everything that we said, and was that true or not? I went Garnacho because, one, the cost savings. If I went Gordon, I would have had 0 in the bank. I've got to still build towards bench boost 37. I have an injured bench player. I have one goalkeeper who's injured and one goalkeeper who has been a little shaky. I'm worried about rotation. I also, even if I got Gordon, I still have 3 forwards I probably want to start, and it was difficult to start all 5 mids at the same time. So let's say I got Gordon in. He might have been first sub this week. Now, Tony didn't end up playing, so Gordon would have subbed in and I would have gotten points. But let's say if Tony did play, I would have had to drop, or bench Solanke, who had a 7-pointer, plus whatever you get from Tony to sort of like offset the 17 points from Gordon. Like, there's no way that either of us could have known that Ivan Toney wasn't going to start home Chef U. I think that was like completely unexpected. So like you factor those 2 things in and it's not quite as bad. I think the only thing that I thought about was looking at the 0.0 in the bank issue. That is a problem. But when I was thinking about my game week 37 squad, I was really focused on a front 3 of Haaland, Isak, and Højlund. And I think we really missed talking about João Pedro coming back for Brighton, because that would have given me a little bit of breathing room between Højlund and João Pedro, those 2 price points. And I think I could have created more funds that way. If I was thinking about him as a third striker, I might have been more willing to gamble this week with less in the bank. What do you think about that?
I don't know that Pedro or Brighton has shown us much lately to like put that at the front of our mind. I saw a lot of people on Twitter being like, "Oh yeah, Pedro transfer locked in, like I'm in," but he didn't return, you know. And I get that maybe you bought him for down the road, and he's cheap, right? But you know they play City this week, and I'm just not convinced that Brighton or anyone on Brighton is going to haul. We've had this conversation about the Brighton assets with Matoma out for as long as he's been and all their injuries and Gross being in the weird price point. I feel like we kind of have gone down the Brighton route a couple times, and I don't know that they've really shown us anything that would suggest that like João Pedro was a viable option in our wildcard team or my wildcard team all those weeks ago and in the team moving forward into the run-in. So I don't really think we missed anything there yet. And I don't know that there were any signs there beyond the Twitter sphere of like, oh yeah, you got to get to Pedro right locked in, like he's going to be a game changer or differential.
Yeah,
didn't happen yet.
He is the penalty taker for Brighton, so I think there's some validity there. It's a double game week pick. He's been decent, not great this year. He had just been injured for a long time, and I think had fallen off a lot of people's radar. Then as soon as he's back playing matches, it sort of I think reconfigures what you can do. Like I don't think he's more likely to score than Højlund, but I think from an FPL standpoint, he's probably a better pick because of the difference in price point and the penalty responsibilities for Brighton.
Sure.
The other thing, we looked at the underlying numbers. We said it from an expected goal involvement standpoint. There's not a huge difference between Gordon and Garnacho, which is still true. But the other thing that I recalled was that Gordon played some minutes at striker this year, while kind of Newcastle had Wilson and Isak out. And I didn't have time to do the analysis, but I wonder if we just took Gordon's minutes at left wing, if his underlying numbers, like on a per 90 basis, were likely to be better than Garnacho's if we basically just threw out the striker minutes this year.
Yeah, who's got time for that?
Right. Yeah, not us. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it was a terrible decision. It's one of those like 50-50s. I think they're valid arguments both ways. And it's hard to evaluate our side of the coin because we haven't seen what we can do with the additional flexibility yet. Sure. If I can patch an injury later down the line, that makes a difference. So
absolutely.
Awesome. With that, we'll do a quick fixture recap. Just a reminder, there are 5 teams playing in Europe this week: City, Arsenal, Liverpool, West Ham, and Aston Villa. There are, 7 teams in double game week 34. That is Liverpool, Arsenal, Palace, Everton, Bournemouth, Wolves, Sheffield United. There are 2 teams that double in game week 35, Chelsea and Spurs. And there are 6 teams that double in game week 37, Chelsea, Spurs, City, Brighton, Newcastle, and Man United. If you're free hitting in 34, we are likely targeting the double game week 37 players with any transfers that we would make. Jace and I did that last week. We'll do it again in game week 35. If you're not free hitting, you'll probably want to target 1 to 2 assets that are doubling in game week 34 this week. And just a reminder, if you use a chip, you only have 1 free transfer the following week. So if you have 2 free transfers this week, but you choose to play the free hit, you will not roll a transfer. You will only have 1 free transfer in game week 35. Did I miss anything? It's a lot of teams doing a lot of things.
No, I think you covered it. Good job, buddy.
All right, let's move on to our team recaps. We kind of already talked about Garnacho Gordon a little bit, but I'd love to hear about the rest of your team, just kind of who you started, points, key decisions. Let's see if we can look at that bench too and figure out if we should have done anything different or you kind of just got unlucky.
Yeah, I started Onana in goal, and the reason being initially, right, is if I captained Sonny and wanted him to haul, then I didn't want Dubravka to be in goal because I didn't want to rob, I would cannibalize those points. So that's why I put Onana in goal. He got 2 points. Should have seen that coming. Gabriel, Udogi, Gusto, Gabriel, Goose Egg, Udogi, Goose Egg, Gusto, 6. Udogi came in actually for Ait Nori, who I had started because, I didn't assume he would play. But if he did, I wanted the potential points there. So Udogi got subbed in, which sucks because I left Robinson on my bench, who also got 6 points. I don't know that there's a world there where I would have started Robinson, but who knows? I could have made him higher up on the bench. But yeah, back line did not do me any favors. Midfield of Salah 2, Palmer with 26, Saka 2, Son 1, yanked at the 58th minute. So glad I moved my captain armband off of him. And then for my striker positions, I started Muniz with 2, which sucks because he had assisted the assister on like the second goal and had every opportunity to score. Holland captain, 20 points, and Darwin with 2. The reason I started Muniz over Garnacho is West Ham have leaked a lot of goals this year. They haven't been great, not been horrible, but not been great. Coming off that European fixture, I thought they'd be a bit leggy, and Muniz could do some damage. So I put my coins on the wrong side of that Fulham field. I should have started Robinson, should have kept Leno. All these should have, right? Which sucks. But like I said, only 3 returns of my 11 players, which kind of sucks because a lot of people, when they don't have a player that plays, they get a Garnacho that subs in for 4 points or Anthony Gordon that subs in for 17 points. I got a new Udogi who subbed in for 0 fucking points. So great. But yeah, 63 points. I guess I can't complain. The average was 58. It's just a tiny red arrow, right? Like I think it was like 80,000 spots. Nothing crazy. Doesn't set me back too much. But it still just sucks leaving all those points on the bench,
Yeah, I can't fault you. It looks like Muniz had another great game from an underlying numbers perspective. 0.82 expected goal involvements, and the Fulham defense allowed 0.93 expected goals conceded. So you were a little bit unlucky that like you said, the field tilted the other direction. I also would not have started Dubravka against Spurs, given that Man United were at home to, or excuse me, they were away to Bournemouth. So yeah, maybe you start the keeper in the home fixture, but I don't necessarily like hate that decision. It's really a 50-50 on keeper a lot of the time, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm just mad because when I switched the armband off of Son, I should have switched my goalkeeper too and hedged, which, you know what I mean? Like I thought
That's true.
to do the one thing, I should have switched the other and I didn't. And that's kind of more why I'm upset with myself because that 6 points puts me right at 69, which would have been, just
right
perfect.
On target.
Right on target. So that's why I'm upset. But whatever, I'm not going to let it get me down. Didn't hurt me too much. Still on target to get sub 1 million, especially after we both haul in this pre-hit in 34 that we're both about to use. How'd you land? Where were we at?
Well, the other thing I'll say on the hedge too, this was what, like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. that you were?
Like 4:30.
Yeah, I think you got to go easy on yourself for getting that one. That's a difficult time for anyone to operate effectively, but that's the world we live in. I think with some of the.
Could you imagine if we lived in England and the deadline was at like a normal time where you could actually make a rational decision an hour before deadline day or deadline time, whatever?
Yeah, we need a handicap. We call it soccer, and the time zones are bad. So like
Absolutely.
We need at least 50 points. The other thing, if it were me, if I were FPL Towers, I think I would move the deadline to like the first kickoff, and that way everybody sees the team sheet of whatever the first game is in the week, and then you're working from equal information. That's still tough for people on the West Coast.
That is, it's a fair point because right now you got all these leaks that people are operating off of, right? So certain people have an advantage over others. I guess you could say that everyone has equal access to like the platforms those leaks are available on, but it's not a horrible idea to just go off of the first team sheet and call it a day because in their new game in that FPL challenge, you can still put a team in like at literally any time before like the last 2 games, I think, or something like that. So they've certainly thought about it at least, right?
Yeah. We'll see. Pep also, did you see the quote unquote fake City league of like Foden starting?
I saw the Foden one. Yeah. And they'd said that they made a last minute switch and then that I guess didn't actually happen. Foden was never
Yeah.
actually in the lineup, or
Yeah,
that,
Pep
yeah.
in the press conference, I think like specifically talked about lineup leaks. So it seems like they're trying to flush them out. And City's the worst team right now. So hopefully, if they get that resolved, I see some Arsenal and some Liverpool, but City consistently Foden, Haaland, KDB leak every week. So that would be nice for the game, I think, and then it just puts everybody on a level playing field. But that's my own personal opinion. I think there's a lot of ways to think about it.
Yeah.
All right. We'll go to my team.
Your
82
team.
points this week. Small green arrow, inching back closer to the top 500K, but not quite as high as I was a few game weeks ago. Chelsea defense finally delivered this week at the same time that Arsenal conceded. That's pretty much my recipe for a green arrow. It's not a good one, but that's how it works. So Petrovic in goal was 6. Also, Udogi was 0. Reguilon with 8. Gusto with 6. Saka with 2. Palmer with 26. Salah with 2. Son with 1. Garnacho auto sub on for Ivan Toney with 4 points. Captain Haaland with 20 points. And Solanke with a very solid 7-pointer. Other than the Gordon stuff, overall, pretty happy with this team. My defense is probably like the most differential part of the team. So again, when they perform above the average asset or Arsenal don't clean, typically I'll see a green arrow. The bench is a little bit concerning. Areola is still injured. Branthwaite went off with a knock, and Amari Bell is still out. So I think that's another case for free hit this week. It buys me one additional week of information before I have to make any future transfers in game week 35. What do you think about that team, that approach? Any comments?
I think you played this week about as well as you could, right? I mean, all of your players that didn't return, save Udogi, got into the game. No goose eggs. You avoided the -1 from the lovely Everton defense. I mean, are you at all concerned with, injury aside, having an Everton defender that you might actually have to play?
Not particularly. It's pretty easy to get Branthwaite to a double game week option like Van Hecke or Maguire, who we talked about last week. And I think they have a decent fixture in game week 37. Let me pull up Branthwaite here. I mean, I'm glad I benched him this week. Certainly. Yeah.
The other pieces.
Sorry, Everton are home, Sheffield United in 37. Yeah. So there you go.
But Sheffield United they can score. I mean, look what they did to Chelsea. It's not like they're impotent. They just can't win, right? There's a difference. But I mean, so there's that. But you played the long game with Reguilon. You stuck to your guns. I don't know if that's true just because you didn't have a wild card or you just really believed in him. But he's really come good for you in the last couple weeks, and it's kind of smooth sailing for Brentford now, right? Luton Town next, Everton, Fulham. I mean, no Fulham at home. They just played Chef U, so I mean, you got 3 or 4 weeks of really solid fixtures for Reguilon. So good on you for holding steady there.
Yeah, the fixtures for Brentford were always good. I think it was just the red card for Reguilon. I think that kind of like really threw off this sort of a delayed gratification of his performances because he came off very early in the game. He got the red card and then he was suspended the next week. But all the reasons I picked him are still true. Brentford have great fixtures. He's still taking some corners and set pieces, and he's 4.4. At least when I got him, he was 4.4. So there's not really there's never going to be a panic
still
button where I feel like I have to get him out. Yeah, still 4.4. I think as a third to fourth defender, he's in a good spot. Let's move on to the matches themselves because we have a lot to talk about this week. So we'll kind of go through each match and then we'll also talk about the potential free hit 34 options from these teams as we are recapping each match. So let's start with probably the one you're most excited to talk about, I suppose, which would be Arsenal 0, Aston Villa 2. Great performance from Villa. I thought Arsenal dominated in the first half. Villa really grew into the game. Odegaard, in particular, in the first half, I thought was just incredible. I mean, the amount of line breaking passes through the defense, the chances that he created looked great, but Villa had some nice defensive recoveries, and I think eventually kept the ball a little bit more in the second half, created some chances. What did you see from this one?
I thought they played the game plan really solidly, right? They had that mid block that they kind of set up, and I know Odegaard kind of dissected them a little in the first half, but like you said, in the second half, I feel like it was Villa's game at that point. You know, they had several that went off the frame too. I mean, it could have been much worse than
Yeah,
just two.
Tielemans and
And for
Watkins
yeah,
off the post. Yeah,
for Arsenal to get embarrassed like that at home at this stage in the title race brought me great satisfaction, just in a normal EPL fan sense. But as far as the FPL wise goes, it sucks that don't have Watkins anymore. And that Nunez has been his replacement, which was a fine move up until this week. That losing the clean sheet from Gabriel hurt, right? But at the same time, again, the Arsenal loss kind of papered over that. Do you think this is a sign of their form? Are they just not a late season team, or do you think this is a blip and they'll win out and keep it close?
I think it's a blip. This can sort of happen. This happens to City too. I feel like the team, the style of play is very similar, where it's very possession heavy.
Yeah, it's because he ripped it right from City. He was on the payroll,
right? And the objective is to kind of control the game and limit variance. But like one thing that happens if there's a limited number of chances in the game is that if your opponent can create one or two high quality chances, I think it's much harder for Arsenal to get back into the game. There's sort of like an anti-Liverpool, right? Where Liverpool is just open, attacking all the time. They're going to allow some chances, but they're going to sort of like out create you. Whereas Arsenal says the total number of chances in this game is going to be very small. So unless you punish us when you get yours, we're likely going to win or draw. And in this case, I thought Villa did a great job when they were given an opportunity of taking advantage of those chances. And like I said, they were solid enough defensively, especially in one-on-one situations off of a couple of Odegaard through balls to keep them in the game. So I don't know if it's a form problem. I think it's just like a result of Arsenal's style where sometimes this is just going to happen.
Yeah. What do you think about Saka and his form? He's getting a lot of shtick on Twitter and in all these other places because he's limping after every game now that he doesn't return. And I've noticed it for a while, but other people are starting to come around to it. Do you think the pressure's just getting to him, or do you think he just needs a penalty and he's back into it?
It reminds me of a little bit earlier in this season when Saka was like a popular sell, and I think that was around the time you didn't own him as well. And then all of a sudden, he had a million double-digit hauls. I think it's just wingers are a little bit streaky, where if he gets a couple penalties and a couple assists off corners, that kind of inflate the underlying XG numbers. He's an incredible asset. But there are games when he doesn't get pens, Arsenal don't score on set pieces, and he's a relatively peripheral player. I think for me, he's the penalty taker and a secondary chance creator on the best team in the league, at least by expected goal differential. It's hard to make a case to get rid of him. At the same time, when we talk about an asset like Anthony Gordon, you're not going to sell Palmer. You're probably going to have to drop Saka to Gordon and maybe spread that cash around your midfield a little bit more. I don't know if I can get myself there yet, and I'm glad we have a couple of fixtures this week to evaluate Arsenal further, because I think that's going to be a really difficult decision down the line. What about you? Are you considering selling him from game week 35 plus? Because I think 34 obviously is a double. It's really 35, 36, 37, 38. You'd be looking to move him.
Right, and that's kind of you hit the nail on the head with my thought process there, right? It's turning Saka to Anthony Gordon, right, or something like that to help steer into that double game week 37. So I'm not super worried about 35, but that's just I don't know. I guess we talked last week, and I was like, maybe Havertz is who I want as opposed to Saka. You make a good point about the penalties, and Arsenal, the refs love giving them penalties, right? I think they've probably gotten the most penalties beyond Chelsea. And
I was going to say,
Chelsea.
Okay.
Yeah, Chelsea's
number
beyond
one.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Beyond Chelsea this season. So you probably do have to have him in your free hit team because I'm sure they're going to get a penalty in this double, maybe against Chelsea, right? But well, I don't know. I still think Havertz is a good shout and a good different way to differentiate yourself, and that's probably the only way I'll get off Saka here in 34 is if I bring in Havertz, and then like I said, I'll probably still move him on regardless of form in 35 or 36.
What did you think of Havertz playing more of a midfield role in this game?
I don't know. I don't know if it is like one of those things where Arteta experimented with it, right? Or he made that change and it didn't work, so now he's much more likely to play that true nine position again, especially if Jesus isn't in. So maybe it was a good thing that they got it out of their system now, and that's more reason to go for Havertz and the free hit as opposed to Saka, especially because I get to rent him for a week and see how I like him as opposed to Saka. But like you say, the penalties is such a big consideration because it's free points, right? So just something to think about. I don't know. Who are your locks from the Arsenal side?
Yeah, on the free hit, for me this week, I'm thinking about I think Saka and at least one center back are probably in every free hit team. Like I said, I just don't see enough to, especially on free hit, if you have the budget, I don't see enough to downgrade Saka to Havertz, because if Haaland's not in your team, like, funds are not really a concern.
Sure.
And they have the best defense in the league, so you need at least one player for cover. I think the center backs too, when we talk about rotation, are going to be more likely to play both games versus. I still think Havertz and Odegaard and Saka are great picks and potentially in these teams, but they're not necessarily nailed for 180 minutes in the same way that I think Saliba or Gabriel might be, or even the keeper Raya. So that's kind of where I'm leaning for this week. What about you?
Yeah, for my locks, I had Saka and again an Arsenal defender. I had Ben White in there as well, but you make a good point about some rotation risk there, especially with maybe his disciplinary record. He had an early yellow in that match against Aston Villa. My possibles, I had Havertz, Raya, and again a second defender if you want to do the Arsenal double defense, which has been a good play for a lot of people. And then for the you could but you shouldn't, I had Odegaard. He does do some really good attacking things, but the returns just really haven't been there to show that. And he came off injured, right? I think it was a leg thing, probably not serious according to Arteta, but probably there's more options in the midfield that you want as opposed to Odegaard, as far as expected points go, you know?
Yeah, I'd agree with that list completely. And then I had could but shouldn't would be Zinchenko, Trossard, and Jesus. You could put those guys in your free hit team, but you probably shouldn't. I don't even know if they make the you could but you shouldn't.
I was going to say that
I think you just throw them out.
If they're in one of these sections, that's the section they're in, right? But I'm with you. I don't know that they're going to get in 90 minutes in the next 2 game weeks, not let alone 120, 180.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the aforementioned Liverpool. They lost 1-0 at home to Crystal Palace. Speaking of the free hit team, I think let's start there, then circle back to Salah. Given sort of a similar situation to Arsenal, where maybe a little bit of form issues, playing in Europe, rotation, etc., are three Liverpools a must in your free hit 34 team this week?
I don't think they're a must, but I think they're a really good option, right? We talk about process, playing the best players and the best fixtures. And I do think Liverpool have two really good fixtures, albeit, everybody loves a Merseyside derby, right? I sure do. So you've got the Everton fixture, and firstly, you've got the Fulham fixture. Two games where there are goals potentially there. There are also some asterisks there, right? Like Everton are maybe going to be more up for it since it's a Merseyside derby. Fulham have traditionally had a pretty good defense at home and not let in more than 2 goals at home this year in one game. So there's some caveats there, but the fixtures are decent, and I think Liverpool have good assets. The only thing I'm concerned with is that kind of second winger attacker because I doubt you have two defensive assets, right? So
Yeah,
you definitely have Salah, and you either have a defender, Allison, or a winger. I don't know that Nunez is where a lot of people are going to go on the free hit, given his recent
interesting.
form. So
Okay.
that's kind of where my head's at. I think you definitely have two. I don't know that you need three or even want three at this point, given kind of the details we just talked about.
Yeah, the defense, they've had one clean sheet in 11 matches.
Sure, but
So,
you got Robertson back, right? You got Trent Alexander-Arnold back, who are both attacking. So I'm not suggesting you have Virgil van Dijk in the back line, right? But I do think that you have one of those attacking fullbacks back there, and don't forget, Allison loves a goal. Okay, we had the famous header from a couple seasons ago. If they're close, if it's down, he's going to go up. I'm just saying, there's potential there. There's precedent.
I was going to mention Allison as my captain this week for that very reason. I think
Oh, yes.
that's a nice analysis. I agree with you. I was going to say Trent. That was basically like you
Yeah.
shouldn't really have Van Dijk because they're not
No.
they're likely not to keep a clean sheet. Probably maybe against Everton, but I think Fulham away. Fulham tends to play them pretty well. With
You know
Marcus
how this
Silva.
goes, though, right? The last Liverpool double game week, there was 0 clean sheets, and now this double game week, everybody's going to be like, "Oh, they're not going to keep a clean sheet. They're going to turn around and fucking keep two," and we're all going to be like, "Why the fuck why weren't we on Liverpool? What were we thinking?" You know?
Yeah, but we
You're
can only
right.
use the evidence that we have, right?
Yeah,
As
that's
of
true.
today, and as of today,
I don't
they're
think
not
you
a
can count
defense that
on
keeps clean.
the Van Dyke bullet header to save you like I did last time around. So yeah, I think it's got to be Robertson or Trent. Do you think Trent's healthy enough to go,
Yeah,
160 minutes in the next two games?
I think he plays 120. I think it's just the injury to Connor Bradley makes him more
Mm-hmm.
attractive. I don't know that I would pick him if Bradley was not hurt, but seeing as that Bradley got injured and Trent subbed on, that to me says they're in a position where they might have to play him more than they want to. Which I think he probably gets 120 minutes. Like I said, that's my prediction.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So, are your locks in this game? Are we just doing Liverpool? We doing Palace both? What do you want to do?
Yeah, we should. Let's talk about both. The other thing I want to say on the Palace side, they're so much better in a back five. Like
Yeah,
I'm not saying that they deserve to win this game. Liverpool still created more chances, but when you have less talent, you can really see the value of being more defensively solid. And they have enough individual talent on offense, as I always say, and Mateta's been playing pretty well too,
yeah,
to be able to create with less attacking players on the field. I just think that setup benefits their team so much more, and I'm actually very high on them this week. I think they have two home fixtures. I think they might have the best double game week of any of these teams, and
yeah,
I'm looking at potentially three
yep,
Palace. If not
same.
if I could have four, I would, but 2 to 3, I think is the number. So yeah, let's talk about both teams from a free hit
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. So for my locks, I think Salah and Eze are the two assets you have to have in your team. I think Eze is the guy for Palace. For possibles, it's a long list, right? Diaz, Trent, Robertson, Allison, Mateta. As Crystal Palace defender, right? Munoz, Anderson, Mitchell, and uh, Henderson in goal, as long as
Yep.
he's healthy and all that, right? For my you could but you shouldn't, I've got Elise and Nunez. I don't know that Elise is healthy enough or has the gas tank to go the 180 and give you the outcome you want. So that's why I think you probably stay away from him. And Nunez, I hope to God I don't need to explain that anymore, because we could call this the Nunez category just like we could the Nick Jackson category.
I guess yeah. Nick Jackson return this week. I don't know.
Twice or
I
three times.
disagree. I disagree with you on Darwin. I think he's
All
very
right.
much impossible this week. It's funny as like the Darwin owner, you're like, I can't take
Yeah.
anymore. Like I'm just so out. And me as the non-Darwin owner is like, oh, this seems like
No,
a
I could go there. Yeah.
totally fine player, which is very Darwin. The only players I had in you could, but you shouldn't were Van Dyke and Allison. I had Elise, Darwin, Diaz as possible picks. Luis Diaz is getting a lot of like play,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
still don't think he's good. So that's just my
You don't.
perspective.
You were off him for the League's Cup final though, right? Because he couldn't
Yeah.
finish to save his life, which is fair. But he's found some form. Imagine if that karate kick went in at the weekend. I mean, that was pretty acrobatic, pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I'm sure his numbers support him. I feel like it's more of an eye test player for me, where it's just like as a winger in Liverpool's attack, I just don't feel like he produces much in terms of end product. I think if you're three Liverpool max, then I think Salah, Trent, Darwin are probably the first places you go.
Yeah. So is Trent or Robertson in your bus team right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Which one? Trent?
I'll tell you at the end.
I think the cool thing here is these injuries coming back. I don't think any of us had Jota on there, but probably worth a look depending on what happens Thursday, right? But there's not going to be anybody who has Trent at this point. I feel like a lot of the competitive players who don't have a free hit aren't going to have him. So Trent is a really good way to differentiate yourself. I know he was a little loose at the weekend, spraying the passes left, right, and center, but it's going to take him a minute to get dialed in. Hopefully he gets maybe 45 minutes against Atalanta on the second leg. But that's a really good point where we can differentiate ourselves. Jota too. I don't know that I want to go there just because he's expensive and a kind of hit and miss, but there's potential there too. If you don't like Luis Diaz, but you want that second attacker that's not Darwin, you could go Jota.
Jota could definitely get some minutes. Or this is the Gakpo hat trick week.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. Let's talk the last title contender, City 5, Luton 1. Pretty much what we expected in this one, kind of once we found out Holland was starting.
Maybe not in the way we expected it, but yeah, that was the scoreline we were all fearful of.
Yeah, now Holland, like you said, had a pretty ridiculous deflection to own goal, then a penalty as well. So it wasn't a classic Holland performance, but I think he created enough chances throughout the match that he sort of warranted the returns he got.
He deserves is a tough word there. He should have had more, right? The very first 2 minutes of the game, De Bruyne played him the perfect pass, which kind of led into this sequence of the craziness of that own goal, which was one of the most wild own goals I've ever seen. I felt so bad for the Luton player, but I just don't understand what's with him recently, because he should have had 2 or 3 more returns. But I'm glad, like I said, I put the captain's armband on him. Kevin, back to winning ways. No Foden. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm Kevin curious. Everybody's always Kevin curious, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You've been out. Uh-huh. You've been out late. He's got the hair. You see him across the bar.
Yeah.
I don't really know I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna say hello.
Yeah.
Let's share a drink.
My friend Anna thinks he's very attractive. He's got a great backside, I guess. Not for me necessarily. But
yeah. Anyway, I think what's interesting for me with Kevin is like when you think about ways to differentiate yourself in your mini leagues. Like we talked about De Bruyne last week, as unfortunate as the Garnacho Gordon decision was, I almost thought about going up to Kevin and captaining him. That was the other transfer on the table. So sort of
that would have been awesome
on that side. Are you thinking Kevin is he viable for 37? Would you transfer out Saka and try and upgrade to Kevin, or would you kind of spread the Saka money to Foden Gordon? Because that's kind of the other path we've been talking about.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on what happens tomorrow, right? And how the UCL stuff shakes out. I think still that your team is going to require too much surgery if you don't have KDB right now to get him. And especially with you and I, right? We get one free transfer next week, which we're both going to use for either Isak or Gordon, right? We need a Newcastle player. And then we have one more free transfer. We're going to have to take a hit at some of this at one point. So I don't know that you've got the runway and the points hits in you to get to a Kevin to where it makes enough sense, especially if he's not guaranteed to play, Whereas with Foden, if he doesn't play, I mean, he's like, what, 8 million at this point? So who cares? You got a probably equal caliber player on the bench that can come in. But if you're spreading 10.5K to get to Kevin, that's where I think it hurts a lot more because you lose that budget from the other parts of your team. So
yeah,
I think if you get him, if you went for him, great, right? Good for you. You probably keep him, but if you don't have him, I don't know that you got to go get him.
It's such a difference in price point relative to the other the midfield assets that I can't justify an additional 2 million for Foden or 2 De Bruyne from Foden. Like I said, unless you think, hey, this guy is the ultimate differential in that double game week, I'm going to captain him, like etc. Nobody else in your mini league has him, like that I could see as an option. But if you're playing to try and score the most points, have the best team possible, I think in the aggregate, the team with Foden is probably better because of what else you can do with the funds.
Yeah.
Would you consider a single game week asset from City on your free hit team? Did you have anybody in your list?
No, I don't. And here's why. Haaland is probably the only one that I would look at just because I'm scared to not have him because of who he was last season and who he's kind of been intermittently this season. But if you look at the numbers, expected points for Haaland, right? He's only like at just north of 6 for the game week. So if you look at Cunha, who is kind of I am looking at, right? He's in that same area, and so is Mateta. They're both expected to return at around 6 points between the 2 game weeks. And Solanke is expected to return around 10. So if you look at the numbers, the fixtures, and the runway and potential for points, I still feel like if you've got 3 solid double game week strikers like Mateta, Cunha, Solanke, I think you go with one of those over Haaland. I know he's attractive, and maybe he can score a hat trick against a leaky Brighton, but to me, the numbers say I have just as good a chance of getting 6 points with Mateta and Cunha, and I have 90 minutes more to get some extras on top of that. So that's why I think I'm going to go without him this game.
Yeah. When you say he's attractive, is it the same way as De Bruyne, or is that sort of a different context? Because you could see them both at the bar, right? Yeah. I don't know which one you go to. Haaland's a little intimidating, maybe a little more exotic, though. Kevin seems a little more preppy.
Yeah, Kevin's more preppy. Haaland's more Harkonnen, which I would probably avoid in a dark alley given his size and hair. I mean, he's a Harkonnen. He's House of the Dragon. That guy looks like every
he does look like Matt Smith. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like a Targaryen, a Harkonnen. He's got all the IPs going. So good for him, man. He's setting scoring records. Could be worse. No, attractive from a points perspective strictly. Yeah. I only have eyes for KDB.
Yeah, I'm agree with you on the double game week strikers. I think they're better options than Haaland this week. It'll be a weird week with Haaland having less ownership than he normally does. So again, it's a potential differential. If you have him, you could captain him, knowing that a lot of free hit teams won't have him. But from an expected points standpoint, the other strikers are probably better picks.
There's potential he's rested too, right?
Yeah.
That Pep Roulette is in effect. We don't know how tomorrow's going to go. He could get injured and answer this question for us, right? But I just think there's more potential with the others. I agree.
All right, let's move on to the next set of fixtures. Newcastle 4, Tottenham 0.
Do we have to talk about this one?
We really don't. Can I just say that we really don't because we already covered Anthony Gordon in depth. We've already talked about Tottenham have 2 double game weeks. They blank this week. Double game week 35, double game week 37. If you're free hitting, you hold your Spurs assets, don't have them in your free hit team. They're back. You're doubling. Everybody's happy. I think unless there's another Newcastle asset that you think is priority here, it's pretty clearly Gordon and Isak as the transfer targets potentially next week. So I don't actually think we need to talk about this one in depth. It's more from a priority standpoint, like Newcastle is sort of the next team on the list.
Yep, I agree. If I wasn't free hitting this week, I would have sold Sonny already. I was so pissed off at him during that match. I can't believe that I want Richarlison to come back so Sonny goes back on the wing and can convert the chances that Timo is squandering. But beyond that, please give me a pass. Don't make me talk about this game anymore.
All right. Moving on, Chelsea 6, Everton 0. We can definitely talk about this one. I thought
That's right.
This was a pretty good one. The question I asked you over text that I wanted to also do on this podcast, because I don't think I answered for myself yet, and I was curious because I'm very biased here. How many active Premier League players are better than Cole Palmer right now? Like, can we name them?
I don't know. What do we mean? You got to define better. Like, what are we talking about here?
Let's say it's a 1 year only, like fantasy draft league. Okay. So you have the first pick in the draft for 1 year of that player. Who goes first?
Yeah, you probably do pick a Palmer, right? Given the value that he has.
I guess I'm thinking like throw out his age and throw out his contract, right? It's just 1 year. How good is he right now? So you could say like Salah maybe is still that number one pick, or Haaland or De Bruyne or Foden. You know,
Saka,
I can make
Son.
arguments. You think Saka's Son are better today than Palmer?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's playing in a horrible team, which you could probably agree with right now, right? They've underperformed a lot. They're fighting over the penalty, which I know you think is Pochettino's fault, which there's some merit there. But I just think that he's kind of been the de facto guy, and the way that Chelsea set up is really good. Pochettino loves a number 20, right? Look at Dele Alli and what he did with him, RIP. But I don't know that if I'm building a team around a guy, Palmer's the one I'm going to. But I mean, he has just played incredibly well this season. Player of the season candidate, absolutely right. Golden Boot candidate, and I hope he wins it over Haaland or him or Watkins. You know, I think one of them it'd be awesome for them to have. I still don't know that you build a team around that guy, right? Like he's not like a Harry Kane caliber player, if you ask me, right? Like if you say, hey, I want to build a team around one guy, it would be a player like Kane. The guy can play all over the place. Maybe we're not going to win a trophy, but I still think he's probably the best player in the world right now.
Palmer reminds me most when I watch him of De Bruyne and Foden. Like it's very clear he's from the City Academy because stylistically it's kind of a roving 10 that can also play on the wing that also gets into the box and shoots, and he's very good at passing the ball forward. So when you say you wouldn't build a team around Palmer, I think I disagree, because to me the comps are Foden and De Bruyne, and I absolutely would build a team around that style of player, because similar to Eze at Palace, right? I mean, that guy can be your offense, and in this hypothetical draft, the next thing to do would be just get a really good defense and like let this one guy create with average offensive players around him.
Yeah, leak 100 goals in a season, but it's okay because Palmer's going to score 20. I mean, would you pick Palmer above Foden and KDB?
I think on a 1 year basis, probably not. My list was Haaland, Salah, Foden, De Bruyne. Where I kind of got stuck was the Saka Son tier of like whether I would take Palmer above those guys right now. I think Son in his prime, like incredible player. Son's a little bit older now, so like potentially I think there's a case for Palmer just on the legs alone.
Yeah.
We've talked about
I would agree with that.
Being a little bit periphery on the wing sometime. I want a guy who's like central, can really make the offense go.
I would put Palmer above Saka for sure.
Okay, so we would have him fourth, fifth?
Fourth or fifth, yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
Why haven't you and I captained him? I think maybe I captained him once. Like, what are we doing this whole season? I mean, he is just double-digit return after double-digit return.
Except for against Sheffield.
Except against Sheffield when a lot of people did captain him, right?
And I think that's probably a wild. Not a lot of people captained him in this match against Everton, which probably was a good match to captain him in hindsight, right? They're very leaky with goals. But I think at the end of the day, it's the team he's playing on, right? I think Chelsea is a very, they've underperformed this year, right? And I think that's why we steer away from captaining him, because at any point in that Everton game, based on Chelsea's past this season, they could have also conceded 4 goals, right? So I think that's what we get distracted by is he's a great player on a subpar team, and that's why the captain's armband hasn't defaulted to him. Now, next season, I think it'll be really interesting to see what Palmer's price, ownership, and all that does, because if Poch does get some more transfers in, or maybe people come back from injury and you put some better players around him or high performing, then maybe that changes and he's not the guy anymore, right? But he's playing Arsenal this week, and I think it'll be interesting to see what he does against
big game. Really big game. Both teams have something to play for too. Chelsea has an outside shot at Europa League. Arsenal obviously chasing the title. Your point about team strength, Chelsea are still 5th in the league for expected goals, and they're 4th in the league expected goal differential. So you have kind of this like Arsenal, City, Liverpool tier. The tier right after that is basically a tier of 1, and it's Chelsea. And then after that is Newcastle, Villa, Tottenham, kind of all bunched together. But like I think from a team strength perspective, especially offensively, they're better than you think they are. So maybe that's it. Maybe their actual position in the table is
We've
bad.
let the narrative kind of. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, something to think about for the postmortem is why didn't I captain Palmer more frequently? I think that's like, and I think everybody's going to ask that question, right? Is it the price point being low? Like it's just uncomfortable to like captain a guy in the 5 millions, and the team. I think that's great. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Let's talk free hit assets from Everton, because they do double. I don't think there's a lot here. I had Pickford,
what assets?
Pickford and a defender as a possible. We're kind of the two. What about you?
I had Pickford and Brantwaite in the you could but you shouldn't category.
Why do you have?
Granted, I know he's injured potentially, but good goal possibility.
Let me make a case for Pickford. They have Forest at home, which Brantwaite not playing is bad for them, certainly, but that's a decent clean sheet chance game. Home game against a team near the bottom of the table.
Not if Gio Reyna's starting again.
Gio Reyna, we'll see about that.
He got an assist.
He did. The second game is away Liverpool, and we saw this with Dubravka earlier in the year, where that's a game where you're going to face a ton of shots. So let's say if you face 30 shots, you only let up 1 or 2 goals, like you can haul. So I kind of like him on free hit because he's got one game with really good clean sheet potential that sort of raises the floor, and then one difficult game where he's going to face a lot of shots that raises the ceiling a little bit. So I don't have him as my starting keeper, but he is my bench keeper this week.
I was going to say, is it Neto? Is it Jose Sa? Which one of those? Is it Henderson? Which one's your starting keeper?
David Raya.
Oh, it's Raya. Oh, okay. Well, he wasn't an option. He's not an option. I didn't give him that one. No, Pickford, if you watched him, which you did in the Chelsea match, several of the goals that he gave away were his fault. And I don't think he's in good form. I think he's in his head. And I think it'll be tough for him to come out of it. It helps that he's coming home. But if you get booed at home by your own fans, it's going to be an issue. So I just don't have a lot of confidence in him. He is not in my starting lineup nor on my bench at the moment. So
fair enough. I mean, after 6-0, I get it. I think I feel less strongly about that this week than I did last week. But from a fixture standpoint, there's at least, I think, a case for it.
Yeah.
All right, let's run through the rest of these and get to our free hit teams. Bournemouth 2, United 2. Free hit assets from Bournemouth. I had Locks, Solanke, Possibles. Actually, on the Manchester United side, Fernandez, Dallo, Onana. And the you could but you shouldn't. Bournemouth defense, 2 tough away matches for me. And then Tavernier, Kluivert. I think Semenyo is hurt too, by the way. So he did not make my list.
Yeah, Semenyo is hurt. That's true.
What do you think about that list? And especially I'm curious about having a United asset on a single game week versus some of the double game week players.
I think it's interesting. Fernandez, you brought up that point since he's on penalties, is a good shout if you've got the risk for that, if you got the tolerance. I don't know that I do. Personally, I didn't put any United players in my list because I don't think I'm going to go there. I know it's Sheffield, but we've been burned by this before. So I don't know. It's Sheffield away, or it's Sheffield at home for United too. And Sheffield United have been better away than they have been at home because I think they feel less cagey, right? They want to go for it. So given United's recent form, I'm probably going to avoid them. I think there's some double game week assets out there. that have higher potential for returns. Because if I bring in Bruno Fernandes and I have to lose Eze or Salah or Osaka or Luis Diaz, right? Like it'd be really difficult to play with 3 forwards and bring Bruno in and still have those double game weekers that I want.
Yeah.
So it's different if they weren't good double game weekers, right? But I think we have some really solid double game week options.
Yeah. Do you agree with Solanke as a lock? I think one case I could make.
Absolutely.
One case I could make against him is that he is highly owned by players not on free hit. So if you want a differential free hit team where you want to try and outscore the non-free hit average by as much as possible, I could see like Cunha, Mateta, Darwin, basically a collection of lower owned forwards instead of Solanke in the double.
Yeah, I just think Solanke's in great form. He scored in his last 2 fixtures, and I don't know that I want to go without him. I think he's got good potential for return, and he's playing twice. So I get your point about wanting to differentiate yourself, but I mean, what is his effective ownership right now? It's 28% set. Yeah, that's decently high. I don't know, man. I don't think I want a United player in my free hit team. Bruno's probably going to make me pay for that, but I just don't think I have the courage for that.
Spoiler alert, I do have one United player starting in my free hit team.
Is it Bruno?
I can't tell you yet.
Oh, okay, here we go. All right,
hang on.
Keep going.
All right. Brentford 2, Sheffield United 0. Ivan Toney's been a disaster because he just doesn't play anymore. So that's been awesome. It's like you look at these fixtures, you're like, okay, Toney differential, this is going to be sick. Home Sheffield United, I'm feeling so good about hanging on to him. And yeah, he blanked. It didn't even blank. He didn't even play. So you got a sub off the bench at least. But yeah, he's gone for Isak in 35. And obviously, if you are not free hitting, he's a transfer to a double game week forward this week. I think that's very straightforward. The one I wanted to ask you about was Brereton Diaz from Sheffield United has creeped into a lot of free hit teams as a 5th mid. What do you think about him versus some of the other picks? No. Just hard no. Burnley at home?
Hard no.
All right.
I will not own a Sheffield United player. No way.
I have him as a possible. But
we went over this with Luton.
Either.
We went over this with Luton Town. You know what I mean? Like the double game week, you're like, oh, differential. And then you're like, oh, he's a shit player on a shit team. And he gets to play like shit twice. Like, that's great.
Yeah. I'm with you. With you. I think it's reasonable, but it's not going to be for me. So
no. Good, but you shouldn't.
Burnley won, Brighton won. Only note I had here was just, hey, return of João Pedro. I think he needs to be on the radar for double game week 37. We've got a couple weeks to figure it out in terms of how he's
good Muniz transfer, right? If you want to get off Muniz, get to João Pedro. I've definitely got that in the back of my mind as we progress down there. Not a priority for me, but definitely, one of an easy route to Pedro is to downgrade laterally move your cheapest forward.
I'll jump to West Ham 0, Fulham 2, because Muniz was kind of the topic for me there as well. He had another game with really good underlying numbers, like we talked about. I think you could honestly just keep him. I think Liverpool is still a decent fixture to play him against. And then the only other team he has this season that's tough is City. If you can bench him for City, and let's say for whatever reason you can't get to João Pedro or like somebody's blocking you, I think he's a fine single game week pick to hang on to despite the blanks, just because he's still putting up great statistics. I don't know what your viewpoint is as an owner.
You can play with 2 strikers, right? Because you've got Haaland and Isak already. So it's not like you need that third double game week striker. You can bench him, right? But if you're using your bench boost, do you want to bench him? Do you want to bench João Pedro? He's not a priority for me to move, right? Like you said, I'm having more fun loving on Muniz than I was when I wasn't. So I think that's really the only move you need to really consider is do you change him out for João Pedro who doubles later? But I don't have a problem keeping Muniz on my bench. I think he's going to score. Hopefully one of these times he subs in after he hauls for me and I get a little lucky. But, if he doesn't score for the rest of the season while I own him, well, no, I'm the problem.
I feel like process-wise, again, process first results, like process-wise, he's 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, whatever he is,
Yeah.
with incredible underlying number. Like, that's never going to be a bad pick to me.
Yep.
Unless his numbers fall off, then sure. But they haven't, right? Just because he's blanked. Last game here, Forest 2, Wolves 2. Wolves do have a double game week. So what are your locks, possibles, and could but you shouldn't players from Wolves?
King Cunha is my lone lock. Possibles, I've got Sarabia, Jose Sa, and Aït-Nouri if he's healthy. For you could but you shouldn't, I've got the Doc himself, Matt Dougherty. I think he's a good differential, and with Aït-Nouri out, he's got potential to return. He likes to get forward, likes to score goals. So those were my Wolves assets. What do you think?
Aït-Nouri, was he yellow flagged? Was he orange flagged?
Yeah, and he wasn't in the team at the weekend. He was yellow flagged, but he wasn't in the team at the weekend, which is the only reason why I'm like, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? So pay attention to the presser, right?
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't play, maybe Doherty is a good person to slot in there just in case.
Okay. My team, I actually had no locks from Wolves. I think Cunha will be the most popular pick from Wolves, but I do think that there are a variety of 3-5-2 teams that you could play that don't involve Cunha, at least in the starting lineups. That's why I just had him as a possible versus a lock. I still think he's a very good pick. Aït-Nouri, we already talked about. I have Kilman as a possible if Aït-Nouri doesn't play. Wolves defender is fine. Sarabia, who's on penalties, playing. He I think is still a good pick. Hwang is back, but his last EPL goal was December 30th. So I think that's a little bit more risky. Not sure of minutes. He's probably more you could but you shouldn't. I also had Jose Sa as a you could but you shouldn't. I think there's better keepers this week. So awesome. That's all the fixtures from last week. Let's wrap up with our free hit bus teams, and we'll talk a little bit more about captaincy as well. Jace, you want to kick us off with your free hit 34 team?
Yeah, absolutely. In goal, I'm starting Neto. In the back line, I've got Gabriel, Alexander-Arnold, and Munoz from Crystal Palace. Midfield of Havertz, Salah, Eze, Luis Diaz, and a front three of Mateta, Cunha, and Solanke with Jose Sa, Garnacho, Zabarni, and Aït-Nouri on my bench. But to be fair, I have not spent a lot of time on that bench. So that's just what my team looks like right now.
What were some of the 50-50 calls in that team?
It's tough because we've talked about it, right? I don't know if I want to do the 3-5-2 or if I want to keep with the 3-4-3. A lot of those considerations on around Liverpool will be determined by what happens on Thursday against the return leg at Atalanta. But I really just looked at the players with the highest expected points for those double game weekers, and those were the ones I kind of prioritized. And then I made some moves, right? So instead of Saka, I had Havertz, which I think is a good way to differentiate yourself. Like you say, a lot of people are already going to have Saka that aren't pre-hitting. So I think Havertz is a good way to put yourself ahead there. My back line, the Arsenal defender is it could be anyone at this point. It could be Ben White. It could be Gabriel. It could be Saliba. I think Gabriel probably has the best. Gabriel is who I already owned, so that's who I defaulted to. Sorry, but I think Saliba probably has the best chance of starting both of those games and playing out those 290 minutes. I think he's the most solid Arsenal defender. But I went back and forth with Raya in goal, right? But I don't think I want Arsenal defense. So it's just a lot of those different conversations that we've already had, right? So I settled on Neto because I want the save points and think he might be sneaky. And I've got Jose Sa on my bench for the same exact reason, right?
Okay.
I don't know that there's incredible clean sheet odds for anyone outside of Raya, but that does take up an Arsenal slot. So just a lot of considerations there. What's your team look like? Right?
Well, I was just going to say it's pretty diverse too. We kind of spread the assets around a little bit. We're not tripled up on 3 teams. We're trying to get a little bit of everybody. in this double game week, which makes it challenging, but also more fun, right? It's different
Triple
than
Palace does make me nervous, though.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah,
I do, but two homes, West Ham, Newcastle, like they
yeah,
have the best fixtures, right? And when
yeah.
else? You're not going to own Triple Palace organically,
No,
right? So this is the
no.
time to do it. Okay, my team is David Raya in goal. Again, I think Arsenal have the best defense in the league. Raya, I'm confident, is going to start both games without injury, so I think it makes sense to get him in. Defense is Trent, Saliba, and Munoz.
No.
We ended up on the same Palace guy. I could also see
Yeah,
Tyrick Mitchell. I just think
yeah,
Palace have better fixtures than Wolves, so it makes sense to go there defensively. And Palace with the back
yeah,
five have the wing backs.
yeah.
So to me, that makes sense. But I could see Mitchell here too, or
I think Munoz is due one, though. I think he's been too attacking to not get a return. So I really do think he's due one over these next two games.
I did look at their underlying attacking metrics, and Munoz was slightly better per 90, but it's sort of the same thing we talked about with Anthony Gordon, where Tyrick Mitchell was playing in a back four earlier in the season, whereas Munoz has pretty much only played in a back five. So that's something you have to think about. And Mitchell did return against Palace as well. He had the,
Yeah.
etc. So midfield is Salah, Saka. I'm surprised you don't have Saka, but I have Saka.
I have Havertz over Saka. So
Yeah. I did pick Bruno in midfield, home Sheffield United. I just want one guy from United. Bruno's on pens. He's on set pieces. I think it still makes sense to go for at least one of their assets. Just have coverage from like a diversification standpoint. And then I did in the current draft have midfield five of Eze and Elise. So 3-5-2. I
you got them
both
both in
Palace
there.
mids. Yeah. Which is
That's
a little risky.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why Elise as well?
I think Elise has played enough minutes to where fitness wise, I feel better about him as a pick than I did a few weeks ago. And we have seen this season when both Eze and Elise are healthy, at least under Hodgson, that both assets are explosive when they play together. So for me, that Eze Elise double up is a really intriguing way to have a potentially higher ceiling for the team. And there's no third forward I feel enough conviction about to pick.
Not Mateta?
I could see Mateta too. I really could. And Cunha and Solanke and Darwin. I think those are like the four guys that I'm looking at. So yeah, it's more of a high ceiling play.
Gotcha.
Front two of Cunha and Solanke. So I do have Cunha. A bench of Pickford in goal, Darwin, who is, I think, circling Cunha and Solanke, 8 Nori, which if he is fit and is going to play, that's a tough one with him and Munoz. Munoz might be more likely to start both games, whereas Wolves have some other options at wingback. And currently Branthwaite, that could be, another defender. That position is likely not going to get any minutes, so I'm not too worried there. What do you think? I think it's a little more risky. Bruno is a little different. Elise is a little bit different. 3-5-2 versus 3-4-3 is a little bit different. But I just try to go for upside, set piece takers, and penalty takers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The penalty piece is the only one I'm worried about, right? Bruno's a great shout there. Not having Saka on pins, and Arsenal are almost guaranteed a pin in these next two games, right? Most likely against Chelsea. Sorry. So, I think those are some considerations there, but I think we both want to go Arnold in the back line, right? We think there's some value there, and the same with the Crystal Palace players. So, we'll see what happens. If I end up with Bruno on my team, I'm going to be upset with myself, I feel like. So maybe I might stay away, but you bring up some good points. But I think at our core, our teams are pretty similar for the most part of who they're made up of.
It is similar decisions for sure. Like I have Saliba, you have Gabriel, right? That's kind of a coin flip. I have Saka, you have Havertz. I would say the pens give Saka the advantage, but Havertz could outscore Saka this week. I mean, that's not unreasonable at all. The forwards, I think there's really only 4 to pick from, so I'm not surprised that we're similar there. I think probably for me, on Bruno, don't let me talk you into him, because last week I talked you into Garnacho and Gordon had 17 points. So keep that in mind. I don't want you to come into the game week 35 pod like Chris, you've done it again, right? 20 points.
I was only joking when I texted you that. Come on.
No, I mean, I know you were, but it's funny, right? Like, we talk to each other, and the point of the podcast, right, is to be really good about thought process. And sometimes we're going to disagree, but hopefully we don't want to just like homogenize, right? Whatever the word is, for no reason, right? We want to have our specific POVs where we can. So, the second component of this is captaincy.
Exactly. Talk about unique point of view, right? Who you captaining?
I'm going Eze this week.
Eze. Interesting. Okay.
I think
that's locked. You're going Eze, huh?
I'm going Eze. I think he's the differential captain this week. I think we've seen enough from Salah and Saka recently. I'm sort of making a bet that potentially they're out of form. Potentially they're going to rotate. I think Eze is going to play as close to 180 minutes for Palace as possible. They have 2 home fixtures against leaky defenses in West Ham and Newcastle. Newcastle especially, I think, has thrown everybody off the scent after 2 straight clean sheets. But the actual players in their back line outside of Schär are not that good.
Yeah, the fact that Dubravka kept a clean sheet with a back line like that is just embarrassing for Spurs.
Yeah. So I think that's a good opportunity. I would expect Eze to be captain by like 10 to 15%. Like, I think he will be a legitimate differential for a lot of people. This isn't like a 2% captaincy punt. I think it'll be like the 3rd to 4th most popular captaincy candidate this week. What about you?
Yeah, I think if you look at expected points of those players that we just talked about, right? Eze and Solanke both are around 10. Salah's at 14.8, so practically 15. So I know Salah's quote unquote out of form, but we've seen this before. So I'm still leaning on giving him the armband just because he has the highest potential for points. He's the best player in a double game week. So I don't know. I'm brave enough to go without Saka, but I don't know that I'm brave enough to go without captaining Salah at the moment, especially with no Haaland or anything like that in my team. I want to be able to, like, because if this goes great, right, it's like 106 points and this is awesome. We're flying. But if it goes bad, it's bad because we don't have Haaland. We don't have, you're not captaining Salah, Saka, or Haaland or Palmer, no Palmer, all these things that we're going without that everyone who's not free hitting have. So you're just losing that pace if it goes horrible. So I guess I'm trying to hedge as much as I can without just basically having a non-free hit team,
I think that's Salah from an underlying numbers standpoint this season, and Liverpool versus Palace, like, Salah is better. The questions I would ask are rotation. Yep. How many minutes does Salah get? Because the expected points projection is based off of 90 minutes in both games, right?
Yep.
The second thing is that Palace have 2 homes, Liverpool have 2 aways. Not that Fulham and Everton are incredible, but I do think both are definitely better at home than they are away, especially in a derby, Merseyside derby. I think Everton could make that one a little bit cagey.
Palace is a tough place to play too. It's one of the best atmospheres I've ever experienced as a fan. So it's a tough place to play. That's true.
Yeah. And again, I think I'm lower. I think Newcastle's thrown everybody off the scent a little bit defensively. I think Palace can set up well to counterattack against them and handle them pretty well. So, but again, if you think Salah is 180 minutes and, again, it's hard to argue that he is the double game week player with the best underlying numbers. Like you said, he's the best player in a double game week. Salah is also going to be owned by a lot of people too. We talked about ownership. So the non-free hit folks are probably going to captain Salah as well. Awesome. Well, this is a great discussion. I look forward to seeing how the free hit drafts evolve over the next few days. We'll see if Bruno gets in your team. We'll see if anybody else gets Kevin curious down the stretch.
Yeah. A lot depends on Europe, right? So I plan on locking the stuff in Friday and not waking up at 4:30 in the morning on Saturday.
Yeah, no. If we're not going to have City this week, I guess really no
no leaks
stuff is going to be as important, and it's a double too. So if you get one, you don't know what the other fixture is. So yeah, I think for me, I really hope that as bad as free hit 29 was, I hope this free hit week really like supercharges my team and my rank. This is kind of our chance to get more towards the rank targets that we've had. And I feel like since I didn't have the second wild card, I've lost a little bit of ground, especially on Isak. Sure. Has been absolutely killing me. So it'll be nice to make some of those points back up and then hopefully grab Isak for Sheffield in game week 35.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. I think that's all we got for you this week. Just a reminder to please rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads at FBL_FreeHitPod. And join us next week to talk game week 35 and hopefully recap a high scoring game week 34 as opposed to the free hit 29 teams. But yeah, we'll talk to you then. Take care.